On this episode of the How to Japanese podcast, I talk about briefly becoming an advice columnist and about my experiences with food poisoning in Japan. Only once in my life have I had the pleasure of serving as an agony aunt, the kind that people write into with questions about their relationships. But I was only ever in a position to provide the advice that I did because of certain failures on my part. The whole story starts in the summer of 2002 when I was in Okayama for the summer to intern at a propeller company. Yes, you heard that right, a propeller company, a company that makes propellers, the kind of propellers that are attached to all sorts of watercraft, large and small, and propel them forwards. I'm sure that I'll have the chance to tell the full story of this experience at some point, and I've told parts of it on other episodes of the podcast. If you heard the karaoke episode, you heard a little bit of it. But suffice it to say for now that I did not spend the whole 2 months making propellers. I was embedded with one of the company's smaller divisions that produced ceramic lights for homes, and I shadowed one of their sales staff. I did some marketing work for them and put together a report and a presentation on the potential for ceramic light sales in the US at the end of the summer. I was excited about all the different possibilities I'd found for them, and in an effort to provide them with multiple options and not be too decisive about any one of them in particular, I kind of hemmed and hawed during my presentation. Maybe they could do this, maybe they could do that, maybe they could try and sell through this magazine or that website. I was pretty happy with what I put together because I worried all summer whether I was being productive enough in the internship beyond the English classes that I was teaching after work hours. When I finished, I asked the youngest member of the group, the person I was closest with, how it went, and she told me bluntly that I'd sounded really negative. I was stunned. I was 20 years old, I really only knew about 20 to 30 people in Japan, and I'd just offended the 8 that I was closest with, the ones I'd worked with all summer. I'd effectively told them to take their ceramic lighting and shove it. Not so explicitly, of course. Have you been able to guess the phrase that got me in trouble? If you answered kamoshirenai, you are correct. Kamoshirenai or kamoshirenai is a way to express the possibility that something may or may not happen. This is a phrase that students learn relatively early on in their studies, and it's incredibly easy to use. You just slap it on to the end of just about any regular word. So for example, taberu kamoshirenai. I might eat something. Someone might eat something. Oishii kamoshirenai. It might be delicious. Oishikunai kamoshirenai. It might not be delicious. It's pretty easy to use. So my limited Japanese led me to overuse this phrase, which has a very distinguishable negative tinge to it. More positive probability and potential is often associated with phrases like desho, while kamoshirenai, kamoshirenai you get used for more like lemony snicket type events. I wrote about this on my website back in 2008, but a quick Google search at the time brought up examples that included the following scenarios. A store might lose a customer, the conventional wisdom may not apply, someone might disappear, smoking might cause a fatal illness, and the teenage years might be bad. My new favorite way to crowdsource Japanese phrases is by searching for them on Twitter and seeing what people are saying. And here are 2 examples that I tracked down. The first is a back and forth between 2 people. いくらトレーニングしても結果が現れないのは睡眠がおろそかになっているからかもしれません. No matter how much training you do, you'll never see results if you're sleeping poorly. And someone responds to this. お体大丈夫でしょうか? 朝方まで恐怖でしたので、その影響が残っているかもしれません. Are you feeling okay? There were really strong winds all night, so you might be feeling the effects. So these are pretty classic examples of how this phrase gets used. Here's another one that's much shorter. 遅刻かもしれません. I might be late. In this case, the Twitter user added かもしれません to a simple noun, 遅刻, which just means to be late, to be tardy. So by overusing this phrase, I'd absolutely communicated what I wanted to communicate, which was that the division perhaps had a chance to sell their products abroad. But the phrasing I used ended up leaning into the impossibility rather than the possibility. In English, we'd resolve this with a different tone. You might be able to sell these ceramic lights online. You might be able to sell these ceramic lights online. Kamoshirenai is often closer to the latter. But it doesn't always have a negative meaning. It can be a gentle suggestion when paired with "いい", the adjective good, nice, sufficient. いいかもしれません. Or used more casually, いいかも. So, それはいいかも is a way you can reply to someone to express mostly positive support for whatever they just said. I wrote about this experience with kamoshirenai on my blog, and about a year later I got a comment from someone named Eleanor who had just asked out a Japanese guy. And here's what she said. I'm a bit worried. I asked out a Japanese guy recently, and when he accepted, he told me, Eri no koto ga suki kamoshirenai. What's the prognosis on my relationship? Am I missing out on some nuance? My blog post about kamoshirenai had focused on the negative aspect of the phrase, and she was understandably frightened. What I had neglected to mention is that kamoshirenai is a qualifier more than anything. It shifts the degree of certainty toward the more uncertain. And in this case, it qualifies suki to a degree of less certainty. But what Eleanor hadn't realized was that suki was quite strong already on its own. It's closer to love than like. So suki kamo is a way for a bashful suitor to qualify the intensity of his or her romantic feelings if they're worried those feelings may not be requited. Whenever I think about kamoshirenai, I remember Eleanor and her Japanese boyfriend and wonder how they're doing. And I think about how ironic and incredibly human it is that we have to qualify the intensity of our feelings for each other in almost every language. I don't know if I'll ever be able to match this level of serendipity with any future advice I provide about the Japanese language. But I do hope to try. If you have any nayamigoto of your own, send me a message. You can reach me at howtojapanese@gmail.com. 食中毒という言葉はご存知でしょうか？食は発音の通り、料理や食べることという意味です。食中毒の中毒はいつも少し不思議だなと思いました。食中毒の全体の意味は腐った食品や未加熱の食品を食べて吐き出したり下痢になったりする病気ということです。不思議だと思った理由は中毒という単語の他の熟語での利用し方です。例えばアルコール中毒、カフェイン中毒、麻薬中毒などほとんどの場合が依存症なんです。僕の知っている限りでは食中毒だけが依存症ではありません。なので語源を調べてみました。中毒の語源は文字通り中に毒があるという意味です。考えてみれば確かにそうなんですね。アルコールは毒で、がんや他の病気にかかるリスクを高めます。麻薬は種類によって変わりますが、多くの場合は毒です。食中毒は細菌がその毒なんです。日本に住んでいた5年間の間、3、4回ぐらい食中毒になってしまいました。なぜかわかりませんが、その頃僕はなりやすい体質だったかもしれません。初めてなった時は、留学生の頃でどこかのタイレストランで食べました。具体的に何が原因だったのかわかりませんが、もしかして豚肉入りのオムレツだったと思います。結構つらかったです。食中毒という単語はその経験で知りました。1日間我慢して薬飲まなかったけど、次の日なかなか治らなくてどうすればいいか迷いました。下痢という言葉もその時まで知る必要もなくて、両方とも調べて薬局屋に行きました。下痢の薬を買いたいんですが、と店員さんに言いました。あ、下痢止めですね。はい、こちらにございます。と店員さんが案内してくれました。下痢止め、なるほどなと思いました。薬の名前は今でも覚えてます。ストッパーという薬なんです。文字通り止めてくれました。タイレストランでは運が悪くて食中毒になりましたが、何年後東京で働いていた頃、自分の判断力で食中毒になりました。この前のエピソードでは英語で少し説明したんですが、ルームシェアしていて5人でアパートに住んでいました。冷蔵庫は日本の冷蔵庫なりに広かったけど、 5人分の食料はなかなか入れなくて狭く感じました。それでよくキッチンテーブルに料理が残されました。韓国人のルームメイトはコンビニでバイトをしていて、よく賞味期限切れの食品を持ち帰ってテーブルに置きっぱなししてました。誰でも食べてもよかった。この食品は切れたばかりなものや切れても質に影響がなさそうなもので、主に食べても安全でした。しかし、たまに他の料理も残されました。ある日、僕は朝早く起きて、ルームメイト数人はまだ起きていました。結婚式の二次会で戻ったばかりのようでした。誰か一人は結婚式から弁当も持って帰ったらしい。どうぞ食べてもいいよと言ってくれました。その弁当は主に大丈夫そうな中身だったけど、エビだけが怪しかったです。生のエビではなかったから結局食べることにして予想通り食中毒になってしまいました。タイレストランの時と比べてそれほど辛くはなかったけど楽しくもなかったです。しかし日本でそのような悪い経験があってよかったです。おかげで単語や言語についていろいろ覚えたし、ライフレッスンにもなりました。そのレッスンは古い弁当を食べるな。わかったか？ Thanks for listening. You can find How to Japanese on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Substack. And we'll see you next week. それではまた来週。